You probably think that waking up totally paralyzed from a nightmare is like your brain malfunctioning.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, like it's a total system crash where your body just completely fails you. But what if that terrifying frozen state is actually your brain's highest form of like optimal functioning? What if it's this highly organized neuroscientific testing ground?
And that paradigm shift completely dismantles how we traditionally view our own rest. We tend to think of sleep as this biological off switch.
Yeah, just cowering down.
Exactly. You hit the pillow, power down, and hopefully get a blank screen for 8 hours.
Hmm.
But in reality, the moment you close your eyes, your nervous system is booting up one of the most sophisticated computational environments in nature.
Which is exactly our mission for this depth dive today.
Yeah.
So we are exploring excerpts from Ellen Chen's really fascinating book, The Night Sandbox, and we are throwing out the traditional mystical dream dictionaries entirely.
Yes, please.
We aren't looking at whether, dreaming of your teeth falling out means you're going to lose money or whatever. Instead, we're uncovering a practical biological framework to take those high-stress, exhausting emotions you experience during the day and metabolize them into actual psychological capital.
And the overarching philosophy in Chen's work, which I just love, is that simply reading and exploring these concepts functions as cognitive training.
Right.
By understanding the neural mechanisms behind your dreams, you actually begin reshaping your waking responses to stress.
Yeah.
So the goal isn't to somehow control your dreams, it's to reclaim your psychological agency the very moment you wake up.
I love that. But to get to that point of agency, we first need to understand the biological environment where these dreams actually happen. And the source material refers to this as the Night Sandbox.
Right, so in software engineering, when programmers write new, potentially volatile code, they don't just drop it straight into the live system.
Because it could crash everything.
Exactly. If the code has a fatal bug, it could crash the entire application. So they test it in an isolated, secure environment called a sandbox. If the code triggers a catastrophic failure, it only happens inside the sandbox, leaving the main system completely untouched.
And our brains are essentially running that exact same security protocol, right?
Pretty much, yeah. During REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, which is when the vast majority of our really vivid narrative dreaming occurs, your brain constructs a virtual test environment.
Oh, okay.
It automatically sweeps through the day's experiences, grabs the most intense, anxious emotional data, and attempts to integrate it into your long-term memory.
But wait, integrating raw anxiety into our long-term memory sounds kind of dangerous. Like if I had a panic-inducing argument with a coworker, I don't want my brain cementing that raw panic into my permanent personality.
Right, which is why the sandbox has biological safeguards. So during REM sleep, the brain actively suppresses the release of stress hormones like norepinephrine.
Oh, wow. So it's chemically altering the experience.
Exactly. It's trying to decouple the memory of the event from the visceral physiological panic associated with it. And simultaneously, your brainstem cuts off motor signals to your spinal cord, which is a phenomenon called rematonia. You're temporarily physically paralyzed.
So you can't like jump out of bed and act out the argument. The system is totally isolated.
Exactly.
But okay, if this environment is stripped of stress hormones and completely physically safe, why do I still have nightmares?
Well,
Like my classic stress dream is frantically trying to pack a suitcase that absolutely won't close and I'm going to miss my flight. I inevitably wake up in a cold sweat feeling this lingering sense of terror, and for those first few seconds, I can't move a muscle. I mean, it feels exactly like a system crash.
and we used to view it that way.
Yeah.
We used to view that waking paralysis, that absolute inability to move after a nightmare, as a helpless shutdown, like a surrender by an overwhelmed nervous system.
Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like.
But recent neuroscience reveals it to be something incredibly sophisticated. Those nightmares are actually survival alarms. When the threat simulation in your dream reaches its absolute peak, your nervous system triggers a profound biological freeze response.
A freeze response. But why is it freezing if there's no actual physical danger in the room?
Because the brain has detected a massive, unresolved emotional threat in the simulation. To process it, it executes what we call central optimization.
Central optimization.
Right. Think about a computer allocating processing power. To survive this simulated threat, the brain slams on the brakes for all bodily output, which is the paralysis.
Okay.
It shuts down the periphery so it can floor the accelerator in the cerebral cortex. It concentrates all available metabolic energy into your brain's computational center to rapidly calculate an optimal survival strategy.
Meaning waking up paralyzed isn't my body failing me. It's like a tactical pause.
Exactly.
It's my brain essentially saying, hold still, divert all power to the mainframe. I need to figure this out right now.
And the tragedy is that our immediate waking instinct is to panic and thrash against that paralysis.
Yeah.
We fight the very mechanism designed to help us.
Right.
The dream gives you the alarm, but it doesn't give you the answer. The computation isn't finished yet when you open your eyes.
Okay, so if I'm lying frozen in bed at, 3 a.m. and my brain is in the middle of this high-level computation, thrashing around is basically unplugging the computer mid-update.
That's a great way to put it.
So how do I stop myself from fighting it and actually let the brain finish its calculation?
Well, that brings us to the practical application of Chen's work, which is the four-step algorithm. And the text illustrates this beautifully with a case study referred to as the cold tea dream.
Oh, yeah, let's look at that one. The dreamer in this case is a mother dealing with empty nest syndrome.
Right.
Her daughters have grown up and moved far away, and in her waking life, she's outwardly managing it well, telling herself it's just a normal stage of life, but her subconscious has detected this massive unresolved sense of loss.
Right, so to process this, her Night Sandbox boots up a simulation.
Okay.
She dreams she's sitting with her husband and two daughters in a private room at a Japanese restaurant.
It's a very specific setting, and then one by one, her family members get up and leave the room.
Yeah.
They all casually say, I'll be right back. Her husband even asks if she wants to step out to say hello to a friend, but she declines. She wants to, preserve the image of her complete family sitting together, so she stays in the room and waits.
And she waits for hours in the dream.
Oh, yeah. Nobody comes back. Finally, she accepts that they aren't returning. She goes to pour a cup of hot tea from the pot on the table, but it's completely empty. So she picks up her husband's cup, drinks his leftover cold tea in one gulp, and immediately wakes up.
Waking up, predictably, fully paralyzed by the freeze response, just completely drained of energy.
And see, if I were applying traditional dream interpretation to that, I'd probably assume the cold tea meant I was being abandoned or that my family's love had grown cold.
Which would only reinforce the emotional trauma.
Yeah.
Our goal is to complete the computation. So step one of Chen's algorithm is defense identification.
So just recognizing the paralysis for what it actually is.
Yes. When she woke up immobilized, she didn't view it as a mystical curse or a sign of personal weakness. She consciously identified that her nervous system was merely trying to stabilize her overwhelmed amygdala, the brain's threat detection center. She essentially named the physiological state.
And naming it kind of takes the fear out of the physical sensation. Like, if I realize my immobility is just a biological pause button, my instinct isn't to fight it anymore.
Exactly. And that realization smoothly transitions into step two, which is energy conservation. Instead of panicking, which burns metabolic resources and spikes your anxiety, she proactively maintained that tactical pause.
Wow.
She essentially told her body, it's okay to hold still, take the energy you need.
Wait, so energy conservation isn't just like closing your eyes and trying to go back to sleep to avoid the feeling. It's more of a state of active stillness.
Active stillness is the perfect term. You are consciously allowing the brain the space and metabolic resources it needs to run its central optimization. You're holding the container for the emotion.
Which sets the stage for step 3, semantic translation. And this is where we start decoding the dream, but not with a mystical dictionary. We're looking at why the brain chose these specific metaphors to file the memory.
Right, because the brain uses metaphors since it organizes memory by emotional resonance. When it tries to file a new, complex, waking emotion, it searches its database for existing physical sensations or imagery that carry a similar emotional weight.
So the private room and the cold tea aren't just random props. They are the closest physiological matches her brain could find to represent her current internal state.
Exactly. Functionally speaking, the private room represented the very enclosed, intensive stage of full-time motherhood she had been living in.
Okay, that makes sense.
The dream wasn't predicting abandonment at all. It was her system rendering a stark visual representation of a completed life stage. And the cold tea was the physical embodiment of the emotional temperature of her current reality. Something that was once warm and nourishing had sat too long and fundamentally changed states.
Wow.
Her subconscious was requesting an update on how she connects with the world now that her primary role has ended.
But if she has decoded the metaphor, she still needs to officially, close the loop on the computation, right? How does she file this away so the alarm stops ringing?
That requires the final component. Step 4, the empowerment declaration. You use clear, waking language to assign a new functional meaning to the event. You create what Chen calls a fact-anchoring statement.
So lying there in active stillness, analyzing the end of that life stage, she formulated a very specific sentence, and her realization was, I was not the one left behind, I was the one set free.
And that shift in phrasing is profoundly important on a neurobiological level.
It makes me think of the software sandbox again. Speaking that fact-anchoring statement feels like writing a brand new line of code that permanently patches a massive bug in her operating system.
That is precisely the mechanism at work.
Yeah.
When you formulate and articulate that new meaning, your fact-anchoring statement, your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical language processing center of your brain, activates.
Okay.
It immediately sends inhibitory calming signals directly down to the amygdala. You are quite literally rewriting the emotional weight of that memory in real time.
That is incredible.
The factual reality of her life, the fact that her children moved away, remained identical. But the meaning was transformed, and the physiological freeze response lifted within minutes.
She metabolized the anxiety into psychological capital. I mean, the cold tea dream is a brilliant illustration of navigating an internal identity shift, a sort of quiet, creeping grief. But our waking lives aren't always quiet.
No, they certainly aren't.
How does the Night Sandbox handle massive external confrontational stress? Like when you are facing an active threat or someone who holds real power over you?
External confrontational stress triggers an entirely different kind of simulation. The source material details an incredible therapy session involving what they call the grizzly bear dream.
The imagery in this one is so intense. The dreamer is a young man who, in his waking life, is terrified about an upcoming meeting with his girlfriend's parents.
Yeah, very common fear.
Right. He is feeling the immense looming weight of patriarchal scrutiny. Just this deep-seated fear of being evaluated and judged as not good enough.
And his brain takes that abstract, complex social anxiety and renders it as a very literal, primal monster in the sandbox.
So he dreams he is standing in a forest, and a massive, highly aggressive grizzly bear is charging straight at him. He is facing imminent destruction.
Right.
The bear rears up, roaring, about to strike him with its paw. But at the last possible microsecond, he does something completely counterintuitive. He suddenly ducks low, slipping directly underneath the massive bear, passing right between its legs.
And the moment he executes that movement, the physics of the dream completely fracture.
Right. The bear instantly petrifies. It expands into a solid, static stone mountain. The space beneath its legs becomes a wide cavern, and the young man simply walks out the other side, completely unharmed.
It is a breathtaking example of neuroplasticity in action during sleep.
I really need to stop and look at this, because if we're simulating survival, ducking under a charging grizzly bear is a terrible strategy.
Well, yeah.
In the real world, that gets you killed. If his brain is trying to protect him, why wouldn't it simulate him finding a weapon or suddenly being able to fly away? Why did his brain choose that specific, bizarre spatial action?
Because the brain wasn't simulating physical physics, it was simulating emotional physics.
Hmm.
The amygdala defaults to incredibly basic binary choices. Punch the threat or run away. Fight or flight. But this dream showcases a phenomenon known as top-down inhibition.
Where a higher brain function steps in and basically overrides the primal instinct.
Exactly. During REM sleep, a specific region called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the VMPFC, is highly active. Choosing to duck under the bear, calculating the spatial coordinates and the timing required to slip between its legs, is not a blind panic response. It's a complex, logical, spatial task.
Ah, I see. So by forcing himself to do something that requires spatial logic in the dream, he is forcibly booting up the prefrontal cortex.
And when the prefrontal cortex boots up, it chemically inhibits the amygdala. It forces the amygdala out of panic mode.
Wow.
The brain executes a threat downgrade. By physically ducking in the dream, which was an embodied simulation where his motor neurons were actually firing for that movement, the dreamer's brain actively recoded the threat.
So cool.
It took a predatory script, which is a dynamic bear that actively hunts you, and downgraded it into static terrain, a mountain that just sits there.
The threat went from a predator that can chase you down to an environmental condition you just have to walk past. I mean, the implications of that for our daily lives are staggering.
They really are. When you face intense pressure in waking life, like a rigid corporate structure, a major evaluation, or highly critical authority figures, your brain often defaults to that predatory script. It floods your system with the feeling that you are being actively hunted.
We've all felt that. You walk into a performance review and suddenly your boss feels like a grizzly bear about to strike.
Right. But you don't actually have to fight a dynamic predator. You can use semantic translation, which is step 3 of the algorithm, to consciously view that obstacle as a stationary mountain. The critical parents, the looming deadline, the demanding boss. They are not hunting you. They are simply terrain.
So if he applies the algorithm when he wakes up, what does his step 4 empowerment declaration look like? Like, how does he patch the code for his upcoming meeting?
In his clinical session, his fact-anchoring statement became, "This is merely a stationary mountain. I just need to adjust my steps and pass through."
I love that.
You don't need to defeat a mountain. You don't need to argue with a mountain or prove your worth to it. You just navigate it.
So taking that active, logical step in the dream, the embodied simulation of ducking, literally paved a new neural pathway for his waking life.
Exactly.
He can walk into that living room to meet his girlfriend's parents, not as prey waiting to be attacked, but as a hiker navigating a trail.
And that illustrates the ultimate function of the Night Sandbox. It runs these high-stakes, terrifying emotional simulations so that when you face the real-world equivalent, your brain has already rehearsed a successful low-anxiety pathway. The code has already been patched.
We have covered incredible ground today. I mean, we started by dismantling the myth of sleep as a simple off switch, revealing this nightly REM sandbox where our brains actively stress test our most difficult emotions.
We really reframe nightmares, too.
Yeah, exactly. They aren't system failures, they are central optimization.
Yeah.
It's your brain slamming on the physical brakes to give your cortex the processing power to calculate a survival strategy.
And crucially, we explored the tool required to finish that calculation upon waking, which is the 4-step algorithm.
Right. So defense identification, recognizing the physiological freeze response without attaching fear to it, energy conservation, engaging in active stillness, taking that tactical pause, semantic translation, decoding the emotional resonance of the metaphors, transforming a predator into terrain, or an abandoned room into freedom, and finally, the empowerment declaration, formulating that fact-anchoring statement to send a calming signal straight to your amygdala.
The core takeaway here is collaboration, not control. You do not need to become a lucid dreamer, commanding the sandbox like a director on a movie set. You simply need to understand the data your brain is handing you when you open your eyes.
It changes everything about how I view a restless night, honestly.
As Ellen Chen emphasizes, reading is training. Just by engaging in this discussion today, by conceptualizing the freeze response as a tactical pause, by visualizing an overwhelming authority figure as a stationary mountain, you have already initiated the process of reshaping your cognitive responses.
That's empowering.
You are building new, more resilient neural pathways right now. You possess the capability to reclaim your psychological agency the very moment you wake up. Give the night back to the brain and the power back to yourself.
Give the night back to the brain and the power back to yourself. There's just so much agency in that perspective.
There really is. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. We've established that the Night Sandbox is where your brain tests and updates its emotional operating system. So the next time you wake up paralyzed by an exhausting, frustrating dream, maybe you're desperately trying to pack a suitcase that won't close, or wandering the halls of a high school you haven't seen in decades, instead of just trying to shake it off with your morning coffee, ask yourself this: what outdated rule in my waking life is my brain desperately trying to force me to overwrite today?
Wow, what a question to start the day with. We think we're just resting, but really we're stepping into the testing ground every single night. Well, until next time, keep exploring the deep dive.